Welcome everybody to Breaking Growth Barriers. So I assume since you're watching this seminar and you're participating in this seminar, that you either are trying to break a growth barrier, which means you are stalemated or you are plateaued, or you are planning to plant a church and you want to get prepared ahead of time and know what the barriers are. And so let's get started. We only have a short time and I want to cover as much material as possible. First of all, let me say, if growth were easy or automatic, then everybody would be growing. And if you do a survey, you talk to 10 pastors and ask them, are they happy with their growth rate? I doubt even one of them will say, oh, absolutely. We're growing more than expected and I just am overjoyed. Everybody wants to grow more than they are. And so I don't want you to feel like that there are simplistic, easy answers to growth. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's similar to, you know, there's a lot of people that have happy marriages, but if you try to come up with a simplistic formula of how to have a happy marriage, 1, 2, 3, well, that's an oversimplification and every situation is different. If I were to do a 30-minute seminar on how to raise excellent children, well, there is no simple 1, 2, 3 answer to that. There's too many variables, and growth is the same way. Let's read Isaiah 28, 23 through 29. I'm reading out of the English Standard Version. Give ear and hear my voice. Give attention and hear my speech. Does he who plow for sowing plow continually? Does he continually open and harrow his ground? When he has leveled its surface, does he not scatter dill, sow cumin, and put in wheat in rows and barley in its proper place, and emmer as the border? For he is rightly instructed. His God teaches him. Dill is not threshed with a threshing sledge, nor is a cartwheel rolled over cumin. But dill's beaten out with a stick, and cumin with a rod. Does one crush grain for bread? No, he does not thresh it forever. When he drives his cartwheel over it with his horses, he does not crush it. This also comes from the Lord of hosts. He is wonderful in counsel and excellent in wisdom. You must recognize that the harvest is delicate and requires specialization. Conditions change in church growth just as they do in a farming situation. Constant adaptation is required. Now, Jesus, let's just talk about this particular passage. This is a picture of a farmer knowing different crops that he's planting, knowing the different techniques for each crop. He's not just out there doing one thing. Plowing is good, but you don't plow all the time. You can thresh certain crops, but others you don't. You can sow seed one way for one particular seed, but the others need to be planted carefully. And so it's a delicate balance. It's what Isaiah is picturing here. And one thing this comes from, it says, is God teaches him, and then on down it says, this also comes from the Lord of hosts. Agriculture was spiritualized by ancient people. A lot of the gods they worshipped related to fertility, and their worship centered around getting rain. It was an agricultural society, so if the rain didn't come, if the crops failed, they died. This was not there was not world commerce where there could, like we have today, if there's drought in one place, we will import food from another place. That couldn't happen then. There was drought in that region. People suffered terribly. And so they spiritualized it. Well, the Jews did too. They had an idea and a thought, tradition, that when Adam was kicked out of the garden, of course, part of the curse was he had to till the ground and earn his living and earn his bread by the sweat of his brow. And so, however, Adam didn't know how to cultivate crops. He had never had to. And so the nature, once he was kicked out of the garden, he didn't have 5 years to become an expert. So the Jewish tradition was that God taught Adam everything he needed to know about agriculture, how to cultivate crops, and gave him that immediate knowledge so that he could survive. Well, and that knowledge passed down. Well, whether that actually happened exactly that way, it makes sense, but we know that we're not in control of a lot of things when we're planting. We're not in control of the rain, the wind, the sun, etc. And when you're planting a church, Jesus related that the harvest of souls is like farming, planting crops. It's like fishing. Those are the two major metaphors he used. So when you think about that, he was talking about commercial farmers and commercial fishermen. So I have never been a commercial farmer, but I have grown a few tomatoes out on my back porch, okay? Well, if the tomatoes don't make it, I'm just going to go to the grocery store and buy some, right? I like to fish, but if I don't catch any fish, I'm not starving that night. Jesus was talking to commercial fishermen. He said, I'll make you to become fishers of men. He was talking about having a system that was guaranteed to produce a result. Commercial farmers have to make a living by crops coming up. Failure is not an option for them. Commercial fishermen, they have to find fish. And they develop methods that's based on a farmer has 100 acres or 1,000 acres, whatever it is. He knows what crops grow in that land. He knows what areas he needs to plow. He knows where the water sits. He knows everything about that field, and he is able to plant it to the maximum of its ability. A fisherman knows the area he's fishing at. He knows exactly where they are, what techniques work here, what techniques don't work there. And so as a church planter, as a pastor, you need to know your field, and you need to develop a repeatable method that allows you to win souls and to plant. And so you can do that. Okay? You can do that. It's not mystical or magical. Church growth is not mystical or magical. It is systematic, and you can learn. God will teach you. God will teach you methods. You will learn methods to where you can produce a consistent harvest. And if you are not producing a consistent result, there's room for it to grow. And I hope this seminar will help you today. So in church planting, and you can apply this if your church is already planted, I'm going to give you 4 different levels, natural progression, natural stages of growth for a church plant. Now, this doesn't come from a book. You'll find a lot of things. You can Google stages of church growth or whatever, and there's a lot of ideas out there. This comes from my personal experience, having planted 7 churches with 6 of them surviving. These are the stages I went through. Okay, so I'll blame it on me. Yours may be different, but this is what I experienced. So 0 to 30, 31 to 60, 61 to 90, 91 to 120. Okay, these are 4 stages, and I'll walk you through them. And each level, there are unique challenges. And if you don't overcome those challenges, you will remain stuck. So if you're stuck right now, you haven't grown in 2 years, let's say, or you typically what happens is you go and you look like you're going to break through, and then what do you know, 2 months later, you're back down to the same number, and you'll swell and you'll come back, you'll go. That means you're plateaued, and so you need to find out what this barrier is. So in the 0 to 30, of course, this is the new church plant. There was nothing there. You come in with just your family or with just your team, maybe 2 or 3 other families. And this stage is, I think this is the most difficult phase of all, because I call it the individual responsibility stage. The church plant is highly reliant on the church planter and his or her family or team during this stage. It's terrifying. Fear can paralyze you at this early stage. A lot of church planters do a lot of prep work to get there, but then when it actually comes to casting your net or putting your pole in the water or planting the seed, they freeze up. Think about being out on a lake in a boat. It's taken a lot to get there. I mean, you may have even had to go buy a boat, maybe your first time to have the boat out on the water, or at least you had to get the boat ready, you had to get gas, you had to pick the spot you were going to fish in, you had to get the trailer hooked up you had to launch the boat and everything. Well, what happened if you don't actually put the pole in the water? Okay, you have to put the pole in the water. You have to throw the net out. What if you go around in circles on the lake all day and say, oh, well, should I put it here? At some point, a church planter's got to get to work and get to talking to people. And nobody's doing that but you, this individual responsibility stage. If you're not talking to people, if you're not knocking the door, if you're not making the contact, if you're not interacting on social media, if you're not scheduling Bible studies, nobody else is, and you will not grow. You can pray around that city all you want to. You can lay hands on pews all you want to. But somewhere you got to get out and talk to people. So your biggest asset here is you and your spouse. You and your spouse. God called you all there. He's given you the answer, and you can't shirk back from that. Much like an entrepreneur, okay? An entrepreneur has to get his hands dirty. You can't start a business and act like you're a corporate CEO. If something needs fixed, you fix it. If a toilet needs unclogged, you unclog it. If the grass needs mowed and there's nobody else to do it, you mow it. You can't skip that stage. Your motto should be, if it is to be, it's up to me. If it is to be, it's up to me. Your mortal danger here is poor time management. You can spend all your time, think about a farmer. What if a farmer spent all their time tuning up their tractor? Or what if they spent all their time washing their tractor rather than getting the seed in the ground? So you have to make sure you're doing the right things, you're doing the important things. And of course, carnality, because everything's so dependent on you. You're carrying the spiritual load, you're doing the spiritual warfare. Everything's just dependent on you in this individual responsibility stage. Sometimes it takes a long time to get a church off the ground because God has to spend 2 or 3 years building the man or woman. He's got to work character flaws out of you. And I'm talking about growth barriers, okay? Sometimes you're the growth barrier, especially this individual responsibility stage. The cause of low growth in this 0 to 30 stage, go look in the mirror. Go look in the mirror because that's could be within yourself, all right? The next stage, a church, once you have gathered 25 to 30 people, they're all connected to you. You have to go to the next stage, which is the planter directed stage. Okay, up until now, all major decisions and most minor ones are being made by the church planter. Growth from here forward is determined by the church planter's ability to enlist more workers to help with the mission of the church. Workers, not leaders. There's a big difference. You need people at this point that's willing to help you mow the grass, unstop the toilets, vacuum the floor, cook for the potluck, be an usher, greeter, more workers, all right? They don't have to be even spiritually mature. They have to be bought into your vision to the level they want to help you accomplish it. So your biggest asset to grow from 30 to 60 is going to be your talented people. Your motto here now is yay team. Now you're building a team. Now it's not just you and your spouse doing things, or you and your family, but you've got other people involved. The mortal danger here is to confuse a worker with a leader. And if you assign spiritual tasks to unqualified people, you're going to be in trouble. I had during this stage, at the last church I planted, I had a guy there, great guy, pipe fitter, very talented, could fix anything. So we wound up putting air conditioners in the church, saved us a boatload of money, got the air conditioning it cost, and he was able to install these split units. Man, he just knew everything, could do anything. Put new ballast in the fluorescent lights, and he just took over all the maintenance of that church. And he also took over the coffee bar. And I mean, he was great, and he helped me so much. But one day he was griping about he wanted to move out of just doing menial stuff and to move into teaching. And so I'm like, okay. And we're having the conversation, and he's getting pretty forceful about it. And so at the right moment, I said, let's call him Bill. I said, Bill, you just dropped the F-bomb in this conversation twice, and this is your pastor sitting here. You're not ready to teach. And so people want to be given spiritual responsibility, but just because they want it doesn't mean they're ready for it, okay? So I had to have a conversation with him about his spiritual growth. It's great that you're able to do all of these tasks, but and that was a positive thing in Bill, that he wanted to be used, okay? He wanted to grow, which was great. But until he was ready, I didn't place him in there. And you can cause yourself a lot of trouble here. But I continued to let him do the coffee, continue to let him be the maintenance man, continue to let him do the work, because that freed me up to do spiritual tasks, right? So look for the cause of low growth within your management skill set. Here's a key factor here. A lot of times to move to this, you have to lower your expectations, lower your standards a little bit. And I'm not talking about standards of holiness. I'm talking about, for example, if you've been doing the coffee bar. In fact, my wife had been doing the coffee bar, and then a pipe fitter, Bill, was doing the coffee bar. You can imagine that the coffee bar didn't look quite as good when Bill was doing it, okay? But it was important for Bill to do it. So instead of the coffee creamer being in a nice little creamer jar and the sugar being in a matching thing and everything being neat, Bill brings out the big old powdered creamer thing, sets it there, and a bag of sugar, I mean, it would look like a break room for pipe fitters. Well, do you fire him, or do you just kind of figure out how to do it? So my wife would come in behind there and kind of fix things up a little bit, and he didn't even notice, So the guy may not mow the yard in those proper strips like you do. He may be a little more, but hey, you've got to do spiritual things. You got to quit doing these menial things if you're going to go to 60, because you don't have a lot of spiritual leaders at this point. And so you've got to spend more of your time doing spiritual things. So there's only so far you can grow, though, with just workers and helpers. Some of them have to move to become leaders. And that's the key, the next stage, 61 to 90. I call this the delegation stage. The responsibility for making all decisions eventually becomes too great, because during this 31 to 60 stage, you're still making the major decisions on everything. You just got people helping you. You have to transition to the delegation stage in order to relieve pressure and free the church planner to do what he or she does best. And so now you have to have some leaders coming alongside of you. For example, you need a children's ministry leader so that they can start making decisions. One of the churches I started, that was my first leader, was a children's ministry leader. And it was such a blessing. My wife was involved in music. She had been trying to do some children's stuff, but all of a sudden this lady rises up. She has the spiritual maturity, she has the passion, and man, we were able to turn the whole children's ministry over to her. What a relief, okay? So we were able to get back to doing what we did best. Your biggest asset during this stage is highly committed apostolic leaders. These people have to be genuinely committed to apostolic doctrine at this point. If you're going to give them spiritual decisions, you're going to give them a charge of things that matter and have spiritual consequences for the church, they need to be fully discipled. Whatever that means, okay? Now, at this stage, especially in a church plant, fully disciples may not mean that they understand everything, but they are committed. They do know that we believe in the oneness of God. That's why we baptize in Jesus' name. They didn't just stumble onto, I got baptized in Jesus' name, so I don't really know how that's different than what it was before, but okay, there comes reckoning. We are oneness, okay? And other people need to obey Acts 2:38 in order to be saved, okay? They need to know that about holiness, okay? They need to have gone through holiness curriculum. They may still be struggling with one or two things, but at least they're committed to following the Word of God. They may not be fully mature. You may not be ready to put them on your board, but they can be helping you make other decisions. And I would say they do need to know about holiness, and they should have been through some curriculum about holiness, and they should be showing signs of bringing their life into conformity to that. Your motto, slow down to speed up. It may feel like you're doing less because you're giving things away. That's okay. Church planners can become at this point small business control freaks, okay? You've controlled everything up until this time, and you can have a difficult time because you care so much about it. It's not that you're just a control freak, it's just that you care so deeply. It's hard for you to give a significant portion. One of the things that was hard for me to do is visitor follow-up. I always ran visitor follow-up. Well, visitor follow-up takes a lot of time. Transitioning that to somebody and trusting them that they're going to be as diligent about following up on these guests as you are or were. It can be a challenge, but you have to realize if I keep doing all the visitor follow-up, I keep doing everything else, teaching all the Bible studies, I keep preaching on Sunday, I keep making sure the church is clean on Sunday, I keep making sure the lawn is mowed, you're just not going to make it. And the church is not going to grow anymore. You have to bring these leaders in. You have to give them significant departments of the church. And they may have a little bumpy takeoff. You have to remain committed to it. Otherwise, you're just going to stay at the same side. You've got to be driven by Isaiah 9:7. Of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end. You need to track your growth every year. Some years you may not grow numerically, but you'll grow financially. You've got to be able to measure and track growth. You may have a year where you don't grow, but you need to identify clearly the reasons why. It may be there was 3 families that moved away that year and there was nothing, you were still doing the same thing. But don't just take no growth or low growth and say, oh, well, no, you've got to be diligent about it or you won't grow. Growth does not come automatic. Growth comes as a result of hard work. And so one of the main things at this stage, 60 to 90, is at this point, up until this point, you have been teaching most of the Bible studies, 90% of the Bible studies. You've been the primary soul winner. A church can only grow so far with the pastor being the primary soul winner. Now, the pastor should always be involved in soul winning, but you've got to have other people involved in this process. And that is difficult for some pastors to make the shift to say, I've got to spend time with leaders. There's a trap on both sides of this. Some church planners make the mistake. They start with a team. Say you start with 3 or 4 families. Church planner decides he's going to act like he's a pastor of 300 people, and he's going to spend all of his time developing leaders. Okay, and so he's got 3 families, and I'm going to pour into these families, and they're going to grow. Not if they don't have soul winning capacity. If they don't know how to win souls, y'all are going to have some great meetings. Y'all are going to talk about how you're going to win the world and win this city and how you're going to plant 4 or 5 other churches. But if nobody goes and wins a soul, nobody's planting 4 or 5 other churches. And you're like an Amway meeting. You know, Amway, I don't know if you remember Amway or not, but it's multi-level marketing. Oh, we're going to all be billionaires. Not if somebody doesn't sell soap. Somebody has to sell soap. You don't just become billionaires sitting around a room signing people up for them to want to become a billionaire. Somebody has to go sell something. Okay? And so if you've grown to 60 as the pastor, you know how to win souls. So you've been winning souls. Okay? Well, at this point, it is now time to shift your attention away from being the primary soul winner, and you need to shift your attention to developing your leaders. You don't have enough, you don't have the capacity to grow this church to 100 by you just winning souls. Because what's going to happen, you're going to get focused. Oh, I'm teaching 5 Bible studies. Now I got to teach 10 Bible studies. Well, you're going to start losing them out the back door because your new converts aren't going to get discipled. And so you have to back off from that. And you have to start teaching your leaders. Here again, that tendency to be a small business control freak. These leaders are not going to do everything the way you do it. We run into the same barriers to growth in starting a business. Most small business do not grow into being multi-billion-dollar corporations. Many of them stay a family operation. They're structured to throw off, say, $100,000 a year. Family's comfortable with that. They all keep doing what they've done, and they may say, "Boy, we need to double sales next year," but they're not willing to change anything they're doing, so they don't double sales next year. They make the same $100,000 next year, the next year they did the previous year, because they're not willing to restructure or do anything different. So look for the causes of low growth in your delegation skills. One danger here is having a codependent church. I'm going to talk about this because it's a real problem. Some small churches are small because they've developed a codependent church. I hear church planners say all the time, "Oh, they really love us. Oh, they're our babies." No, you don't want to have a family where you have 5 kids and they're all above 30 and they're all still living in your house and you're all still paying their bills. You want to have children. There's a natural stage for children to be your spiritual babies and they to be growing. But at some point they got to grow up and take responsibility, get out of the house and get their own job. Okay? And you've got to let them do it. And sometimes parents are the ones that keep kids down because they don't want to let them go. You can't do that as a pastor. You've got to let these people grow. They've got to become your trusted advisors and your team members. I could talk a long time about that, but I won't. Okay, don't become codependent, church. The last stage, I won't talk a lot about it, and I'm about to close, but 91 to 120. Okay, so above, this is where you get to be above 100. Delegation is well and good. However, church plants stall at the delegation stage because they lack systems to monitor the newly delegated responsibilities, and they quickly become inefficient. So right up until this point, I've been talking about you, I've been talking about your workers, I've been talking about your leaders, and that's all personnel based. Now you've got to develop systems. To get above 100, you've got to have systems in place. And there's so many good books you can read about this, church systems, but because you as a leader have to have a way to monitor that everything is running okay. And otherwise you're going to revert back to bad habits. And so the growth at this stage is determined by the quality of new systems that are in place. You need to have a outreach system. You need to have a system for your administration. You need to have a system for your worship. You have to program youth departments, men's departments, ladies departments. Okay, all of these systems have to be in place. Your biggest asset here is ready-made systems. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Pull some systems off the shelf. How is so-and-so doing it? Do it. Get you a book. Follow it. Do it. Okay, you don't have to be a brilliant systems engineer to program your church. Motto, the Goldilocks principles. Okay, not too hot, not too cold, but just right. Systems are to establish control. Not too much control, not too little, but just the right amount. Don't impose a system designed for a church of 500 on your church of 80. Okay? Modify it. It's okay. You can have that thing so programmed, have people filling out so many reports and so much bureaucracy that the system collapses under its own weight, and the system itself becomes a growth barrier. You don't want that. Your mortal danger here is being a dumper and not a delegator, just dumping things on people and not having a proper process of delegation. You need to study on and improve your delegation skills. Look for causes of low growth here in your inability to change your leadership style. If you are not, through each of these stages, if you are not going through a metamorphosis and not changing, if you're comfortable through all these stages, if you're growing through them, fine. If you're growing, that's fine. But if you're just remaining comfortable, likely you're not going to grow. It takes excruciating change to go from each stage. And what a lot of people don't realize, they say, well, I want to go to the next stage of growth, and what little changes do I need to make? That's what everybody wants to know. And answer is none. You got to make huge changes, and painful changes. Of course, breaking growth barriers will not happen if you're satisfied with where you are, or you make excuses for why you cannot grow. Breaking growth barriers is back-breaking, bone-crunching, hard work. And pastor, leader, you are the key to breaking through those growth barriers.